took the night job no one else would
He's gonna
touch,
be okay.
because he had a daughter to feed and
I'll
nothing
make
left
sure
to
of it.
lose. They warned him the building was cursed, the hours were brutal, and no one ever lasted past one shift. But by morning, a black luxury car stopped outside his tiny apartment. And the woman at his door wasn't there to fire him. She was the CEO. And she knew his name. Right finger if you believe one night can change everything. Right finger if you love emotional twists, hidden power, and stories that stay with you long after they end. Right finger subscribe now, because this story only gets deeper from here. Ethan Cole hadn't planned on taking the night job, especially not the one everyone in the city avoided like it carried a disease, but plans were a luxury he lost the day his wife walked out and left him with a 5-year-old daughter, a half-empty fridge, and eviction notices taped crookedly to the apartment door, so when the job listing appeared on a flickering screen at the unemployment office, night custodian needed. Immediate start. No experience required. High pay. One night only. He tore off the number before common sense could stop him, because high pay and immediate start were words that spoke louder than rumors, and the rumors were loud, whispered in line by men who shook their heads and women who lowered their voices, saying no one lasted, saying something wasn't right about the building, saying the last guy quit before sunrise and refused to explain why. But Ethan still called, because Lily needed shoes without holes and dinner that didn't come from a can. And by dusk he was standing in front of a towering glass and steel office complex that looked too expensive to be abandoned yet too silent to be alive, the company name etched in silver letters he barely recognized, a global corporation whose commercials played during primetime news, and yet here he was being buzzed in by an automated voice that didn't ask his name, didn't ask for ID, just unlocked the door like it had been waiting for him, and inside the air smelled of polished marble and something colder underneath. The kind of cold that made the back of his neck tighten, but the instructions left at the front desk were simple. Clean floors, check power levels, report anything unusual, and the pay envelope promised more money than he'd earned in a week of honest work, so he pushed the unease down and got started, pushing his cart through endless corridors where lights flickered at odd intervals and security cameras followed him with quiet, mechanical patience, and as the hours stretched past midnight the building revealed itself in fragments. Locked executive offices filled with awards and framed magazine covers, a server room humming like a living thing, a top-floor conference room with a single chair at the head of a massive table, as if someone important always sat there even when no one else dared enter, and sometime around 2 a.m. the power dipped hard enough to shut down half the floor, alarms stuttering before dying completely, and Ethan did what no one else had done according to the notes left behind by previous workers. He didn't leave, didn't panic, didn't call the number that rang endlessly. He followed protocol, manual switches, backup generators, sweating through his shirt as he traced the fault to a maintenance access panel no one had opened in years, discovering exposed wiring deliberately sabotaged, not broken by age but cut clean, intentional, and as he worked he spoke softly to himself the way he did when Lily was scared of thunderstorms, steadying his hands, fixing what he could with limited tools, restoring power floor by floor until the building breathed again, lights blooming back to life in waves, and when dawn finally crept through the glass walls he thought he'd survived. Nothing more than a rough shift, grabbed his pay envelope, and went home to make Lily breakfast before school, unaware that every move he made had been watched from a darkened office high above, unaware that someone had been waiting to see whether he would run like the others or stay, unaware that the cuts in the wiring weren't random but a test, and when a black executive sedan rolled to a stop outside his peeling apartment building just after sunrise, neighbors peeking through curtains as a woman in a tailored coat stepped out, heels clicking on cracked concrete like punctuation marks, Ethan was still in his worn t-shirt pouring cereal, and Lily was asking why a fancy lady was walking toward their door, and when the knock came, firm, deliberate, impossible to ignore, Ethan opened it to find a woman whose face he recognized from billboards and business magazines, the youngest CEO in the company's history, eyes sharp but tired, studying him not like a stranger but like an answer, and the first words out of her mouth weren't a greeting or a threat, but a quiet sentence that made his chest tighten. Mr. Cole, you were the only one who didn't run. We need to talk. Ethan didn't invite her in at first, not because he was rude but because shock froze him in place, the CEO standing in his doorway like a glitch in reality, her presence shrinking the narrow hallway behind her, Lily peeking from around his leg clutching her cereal bowl as if it were a shield, and it took the woman lowering herself slightly, softening her voice, and saying Lily's name, saying it like she already knew it, for Ethan to step aside and let her enter, the smell of expensive perfume clashing with the stale coffee and laundry soap of a life held together by routine and sacrifice, and as she sat at their small kitchen table, folding her hands with practiced calm, she explained that her name was Vivian Locke, that the building he worked in wasn't just an office complex but the nerve center of a multinational company bleeding from the inside, That the night job no one wanted wasn't a coincidence but a filter, a way to see who stayed when no one was watching, who fixed instead of fled, who chose responsibility over fear. And as Ethan listened, exhaustion settling into his bones, she laid out a truth stranger than any rumor. That someone within her own executive circle had been sabotaging systems, staging failures to justify selling off assets quietly, pushing her toward decisions she refused to make, and every custodian, guard, or contractor before him had either panicked, quit, or pretended not to see. But Ethan had restored power manually, documented the damage, and left notes that landed directly on her private desk before dawn, notes written in a careful hand that didn't accuse or beg, only reported facts, and she told him that was why she was here, not to fire him but to offer something else entirely, an off-the-books role as night operations coordinator, temporary, dangerous to his reputation if it failed, but paid well enough to change his life, and Ethan almost laughed at the absurdity of it, a man who still clipped coupons being asked to step into corporate warfare. Yet when Vivian glanced at Lily again, noticing the patched backpack by the door and the way Ethan's eyes tracked every sound outside like someone used to waiting for the worst, she said quietly that she understood desperation, that she'd grown up watching her mother work double shifts while executives made decisions that never touched their own lives, and she needed someone unconnected, someone invisible, someone honest, and that word, honest, hit Ethan harder than the money ever could, because it was the one thing he'd protected fiercely since everything else fell apart, and so he agreed, not shaking her hand like a deal but nodding like a man stepping onto ice. And that night he returned to the building not as a cleaner but as a watcher, given access codes that opened doors even senior managers couldn't enter, walking halls that felt different now that he understood their secrets, discovering hidden maintenance logs altered after midnight, cameras redirected for exactly 7 minutes every night, financial terminals accessed under ghost credentials, and as he pieced it together he realized the sabotage wasn't meant to destroy the company outright but to weaken it just enough for a takeover, a slow bleed orchestrated by someone patient and powerful, someone who knew Vivian's habits and blind spots. And when he brought his findings to her in the early hours of the morning, meeting in that same top-floor conference room with a single chair, she listened without interrupting, her composure cracking only once when he mentioned a name she hadn't expected. Her own mentor, the man who'd groomed her for leadership, and in that moment Ethan saw past the CEO to the woman carrying the weight of betrayal, and as days blurred into nights, their alliance deepened into something unspoken, trust forged in exhaustion and shared silence, until the saboteur realized someone new was in play and the warnings escalated, threatening emails sent to Ethan's phone, anonymous calls that hung up when Lily answered, a break-in that left nothing stolen but everything disturbed, and the final message that made Vivian's jaw tighten with fury. Walk away or the girl pays. And standing there in the dim office light, Ethan understood the job had never just been about a building or a company. It had been about choosing who he was when everything he loved was placed on the line, and for the first time since his wife left, he didn't feel alone facing it. Ethan didn't tell Lily about the threat, not because he didn't trust her strength but because some weights were never meant for small shoulders, and instead he packed her lunch with extra care the next morning, walked her to school under a sky that looked too calm for what waited beneath it, and when he returned to the building that night he did so with a decision already made, one that surprised even Vivian when he told her he was staying, that he wouldn't walk away, that fear had already taken enough from him, and she didn't argue, didn't plead, only nodded once like a soldier accepting another into the line, and together they set a trap not for destruction but for exposure, rerouting the very systems the saboteur believed he controlled, letting small failures occur while recording everything, financial trails, access logs, audio from closed-door meetings, and as dawn approached the man revealed himself exactly where Ethan predicted, slipping into the building under the assumption of power, unaware that the cameras were watching this time, unaware that every keystroke was being mirrored to servers beyond his reach, and when he realized too late that the company hadn't weakened but tightened around him, his anger turned personal, his voice echoing through the conference room as he confronted Vivian, accusing her of ingratitude, of forgetting who put her where she stood, and in that moment Ethan stepped forward, not as an employee but as a witness, placing evidence on the table piece by piece, and the room fell silent not because of authority but because truth had weight, and by sunrise the man was gone, escorted out of the building he once ruled from shadows, charges pending, allies scrambling, the company saved not by force but by clarity, and as the city woke unaware of the war fought overnight, Vivian stood beside Ethan on the glass balcony watching light spill over the skyline, telling him the board would never know how close everything came to collapsing, that officially he was just a contractor who did his job well, but unofficially he had a place if he wanted it, stability, respect, a future that didn't depend on surviving one night at a time, And Ethan thought of Lily, of shoes without holes and dinners that didn't come from cans, of bedtime stories read without glancing at overdue bills, and he accepted, not because of the title or the pay but because someone finally saw him as more than what he'd lost. And weeks later, when the building buzzed with new energy and no one whispered about cursed night jobs anymore, Ethan walked Lily through the lobby, her eyes wide at the height and light, and Vivian met them there not in heels but flats, kneeling to Lily's level and thanking her for sharing her dad, and Lily smiled the way children do when they understand more than adults think, and as they left together, no longer separate lives intersecting by chance but a small, hard-earned family built on trust and choice, Ethan realized the night job no one wanted hadn't saved him by luck or charity, but by reminding him that staying, fixing, and refusing to run could change not just a company, but an entire life, and somewhere behind them, high above the city, lights stayed on through the night, no longer as a test, but as a promise.